Here we are.
Yeah,
Again.
welcome. Welcome to our new home.
Our new studio.
Yes.
We've done this once before. This is our second go around at Unpermitted with Chris and Tony.
Exponentially getting better.
Yes,
Yes.
hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's getting better each time.
That last one, I felt like I was on a date with you. We were sitting on the same side of the table. We could have been holding hands for anybody knows.
It was pretty intimate.
Yeah.
But you know what?
This is a good distance. I like this.
This is a
better.
good distance. I like the new chairs.
Yeah, very comfy.
It's throwing off a very Club Shay Shay vibe. That's not necessarily what we're going for,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
definitely,
We want to be different, though. That's true.
we do. So, I think you brought up a good point. Like, this podcast, let's talk about what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
You know.
So, the podcast has been something that we've been talking about since day one, since I got hired here. And, again, we had to remodel the studio. We had some technical difficulties, but we want to do it right. But we're excited to actually get it going. And we don't want to be like every other podcast. We don't want to be like boring and stuffy and just talk about technical stuff. We want to capture the humanity. At least for me, I want to talk to interesting people with interesting backgrounds who have a passion in the AEC, world, and maybe not even the AEC world. Maybe it's just business-oriented people, business development people. I know we have a guest that we want to bring on who's an MMA, kickboxing coach. They're actually training right now. I don't know if you guys could hear that.
You can actually hear them hitting the pad. So
hitting
I
the
don't know how
mitts
good,
yeah.
our, mics are picking up that. But
They look fancy.
They look fancy,
Yeah.
but I assure you they're not.
What do you want this show to be like?
I have a similar, goal for this show. I really, for me, it's always about the why behind everything, the why behind why we do this, the why behind, what our clients are trying to achieve. I think that's more important to me than the actual blueprints, right? The building of any project, is math. But the real excitement for me is a story that each project is trying to tell, and each piece of real estate has a different story, and I think I really want to bring out some interesting and compelling stories. People in our industry, even industries that are tangentially, related to us, but not necessarily a direct, just things that we find interesting. I think one of the things that I really like, you came up with the name Unpermitted, which I fell in love with immediately. Tell me why you chose that name and like.
I just was looking at something that was a little bit ironic in the construction industry, and I don't know, it kind of just stood out to me too. It's not like we do unpermitted work. I would like to just make that very clear. Not every work requires a permit though, like for replacements and things of that nature. But I wanted something that was a little bit edgier because I feel like we're going to be a little bit edgier, And again, it's not like we're going to be fully discussing like what are the benefits between, steel and wood structures. We want to take a deeper dive. I had an interesting conversation with an architect. We've been kind of both playing around, floating the idea out to people that we have this podcast and we want to bring them on as guests. And I've been talking to a few people, and some people don't have, the most exciting story, and that's okay, and some people have like really, really great stories,
and who are we to judge what's exciting? What's
Exactly.
exciting to us may not be exciting to someone else. So I think having a platform that just gives everyone the opportunity to tell their story, and of course, we're always going to have a construction or general contracting focus, but I think again,
or business focus or business
focus.
Development focus.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So we want to bring in.
We're not going to get too crazy. We might talk about some ancient civilizations here.
Well, for the audience, Chris, let me tell you, since I've been working here, before you joined, it was just business as usual. And as soon as you came on board, and I think you came into my office and you're like, I really want to talk about some ancient civilizations. And I think we talked about the pyramid structures.
Yeah.
And hey, that's construction related, right? Have you seen?
Agree.
That.
That's actually probably what got me to love construction was when I was 14 years old. My dad had took me to Egypt, and seeing the pyramids up close and personal, it's like this structure, like maybe not construction specific. I wasn't like, oh, I want to be Bob the Builder now, but I'm like seeing this massive structure really intrigued something in me. And then when we got back to the hotel, like our sink was leaking, and I looked under, and there was like somebody had literally put like a piece of gum on a hole on the pipe. And so I was just like, okay, this is crazy. How did this go backwards so far? And where are we going in the future? And then I started just kind of researching, even, I mean, and then I didn't know that I was going to be in construction much later on in my life, and we can get into that later. But I agree. You know, interesting topics such as AI also, I think is another one.
You know, you mentioned AI, right? And this is unscripted. We don't normally have, you know, a plan of what we want to talk about. You know, when it's just you and I, we just kind of free flow here. But it's funny. I just pulled this up. Microsoft officially releases 40 safe jobs from AI and the 40 most at risk in this stunning new document, right? And what's funny, I mean, I won't bore you with the entire, article.
Please read us the entire. No,
Yeah. No, on copyright laws. I don't want Microsoft coming after us.
You don't want Bill Gates to be upset.
Bill. Yeah, we want to keep Bill on the right side of the ledger here. But the important thing is they list off about 40 different jobs that are going to be at risk, and 40 different jobs that are going to be, you know, kind of safe. And I would say 1/3 of the safe jobs are in construction.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it says framers, drywall installers, you know.
That's good.
Yeah, plumbers. That's another, you know.
Yeah, trades. The trade.
The trades, and we see that, you know, ever since, what was that show that was on where, you know, they really focus on the trades. Was it Ugly Jobs?
How I Met Your Mother?
No. Was it Ugly Jobs?
Oh, Ugly Jobs. Yeah. Dirty Jobs.
Dirty Jobs. Yeah. And I think, you know, and that was way before its time, right? You know, and highlighting, you know, what people have canned as dirty jobs really are great jobs, you know, great careers, and it impacts every one of our lives. So even like what you were saying about, you know, kind of reverse engineering, you know, what you saw under the sink, you know, it's funny because that ties into what we do, because, you know, a lot of, you know, what we do at Global Construction and Kapella Group is renovations, and you're often, you know, stepping into a project where you're fixing or maybe modifying someone's mistake, or someone's, you know, they didn't fully think through the job correctly.
Yeah.
And now we have a second chance to look at this project, look at this piece of real estate, and say, okay, if we're going to repurpose it, how do we take what we have right now, kind of untangle the mess that was left, and create something different and better. And I think that, for me, you know, as a passion of what I didn't think I was going to enjoy.
Yeah, construction. This is new industry.
This is totally new to me. You know, the fact that we're going to come on as construction experts, that is not who we are. At least not who I am. You have a much more solid background in construction, and I lean on you daily for that. You know,
which even then, it's just like there's so much to learn here. You know, I've been doing this for about a decade, and it's just like I'm learning something new every day. Like Dennis teaches me something new about construction every day, and it just it's tough. You know, people go their whole careers and still continuously are learning. But I wanted to jump back to something about that top 40 jobs, because I just recently read an article too that the younger generation, they're like less likely to want to go to college now, and they're going straight to like tradescraft, you know, electricians, plumbers, things of that nature. So, I mean, it's kind of weird to see like how the world kind of is cyclical. You know, those jobs, those blue collar jobs, you know, almost had a stigma of being looked down upon from, you know, certain people, and now it feels like it's going to be the next safest bet.
And it's creating value, and I will tell you, I'm so glad to, you know, in this, I guess, second iteration of my career, because I spent 20 years in multifamily, you know, 20 years doing operations on that side, 20 years of looking at spreadsheets and, you know, doing forecasting and spreading, you know, looking at financials, to actually go and be a part of actually, you know, using my hands and measuring things. Even for me, that's like, that's as manly as I've gotten in the construction industry. But knowing that you're a part of that, I think is, you know, for me, very rewarding, you know.
I agree. It's always nice to see all of your hard work. I mean, that's my favorite part of the project is, releasing it back to the client, because it's always an arm wrestle. It's always a tug of war. There's never been a construction job that I've been on where the plans were perfect. There's always change orders. There's always little issues, and that's what I like. That's why I like Kapella and Global Construction, is that like we really take an extra step in building the relationship. And I think that's so important. And I think that's something that a lot of these companies miss. They become more numbers, dollars, and cents, and you can't build relationship off that type of foundation. It's got to be built with trust. It's got to be with authenticity. I mean, we talked about it previously, like what makes a person like a chill person to talk to.
Right.
And it was just like empathy, authenticity, honesty, like these core values. A lot of these huge, larger general contractors lose those. I mean, and on their website, it'll be printed right there. It'll be like operating with integrity. And it's like,
What does
well,
that mean?
I hope so.
Yeah.
It's like that day and age, I think, is gone too. The whole website SEO traffic, how people are finding construction companies. It's almost like I would wonder where business developers, and sales type things end up on that list as well, because I feel like we've went through this cycle of like the internet, and it like spit out all these tricks, and now people are getting wiser, and now they're kind of like, maybe either we're going to go super hard AI, or a lot of people are maybe going to like tend to get away from AI, because AI's got some scary thoughts to it too.
Very
which
scary.
brings it back to like, okay, human interaction. Let's start back at the beginning. And I think it's so important. There's a lot of calls that I make where people are just put you off. They write you off. Don't call me ever again. How'd you get my number? And it's tough. For every 100 calls, you might get five decent
and tell
ones.
me though, when you do get that one nugget, it's enough to drive you for at least
It's
48
sweet,
hours.
yeah.
And then you
And especially if it's like a nugget that has multiple little baby nuggets, like Stellar, for example. We're currently working with Stellar Senior Living. So I guess maybe before we kind of jump in, should we just talk a little bit about the verticals and what it is we do at Global?
Yeah,
we promised our boss Dennis we would do a little bit of talking about the company.
Well, it's kind enough since he is sponsoring Unpermitted.
Yes.
It is sponsored by Global Construction. So
Yeah, and Kapella Roofing.
And Kapella Roofing. So we should talk a little bit about that. But Global Construction, general contracting firm that specializes in major renovations, major capex work in three verticals, which is multifamily, senior housing, and hospitality. And we do several other projects, but that's really kind of our wheelhouse.
Yeah.
It's our bailiwick.
Occupied renovations.
And that piece alone, the occupied renovation, that's something that's new to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I've been managing portfolios, $350 million up to $500 million portfolios. So probably in my career, close to 70,000 units.
Wow.
I have never done occupied renovations in multifamily. That just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, because when I think about it, that vacancy loss when you're doing a renovation, but I get it, the safety and all that. Liability. But what Global Construction, what Dennis and their group, really our group, I should say, but has done, they've been able to find a system where they can work in the most sensitive areas. We're talking senior living, memory care, skilled nursing facilities, right? So, the bar is really high. There is zero threshold for mistake.
Yeah.
And it is an orchestrated kind of ballet to see these groups, these different trades come in and out with the resident living in the unit.
Yeah.
When I first came here, I thought occupied, working in occupied spaces meant that you move the resident out, put them in another unit or another floor.
Which sometimes that's
It
case,
is,
yeah.
but to the level at which,
the trust that these clients have with Global is to renovate a unit while the tenant or resident is literally living inside of it. There's a huge amount of liability there.
Absolutely.
And that's a niche that I think, we started working on from day one. And to bring it back to that humanity level, when I was talking about other general contractors, if you're working in a sensitive populace such as a senior living, and you're renovating a unit with that resident living inside of it, you have to have that little human touch. And so does your employees, and so does your subcontractors. You can't just be, just Mr. These people, they're curious, they want to ask questions. This is their home. You have to be very gentle with their belongings, and it's a process, and it's a niche.
It really is a niche, and you've been in the construction industry for a long time, so how difficult it is to find project managers, superintendents, right? Just from a skill set basis alone. But now you add this additional component of needing to have the soft skills, to be able to interact, like I said.
The emotional intelligence is like
the empathy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the other part that we're talking about, to be a good person. The empathy that's missing. And I think we found a niche, and I think we, are attracting people who have that similar passion. I think we've done a really good job of building a team that understands the importance of that understands that we go beyond the blueprint. We go even beyond the individual. We have a very holistic approach when we take on projects, and we don't take on every project. We're very selective on who we work with, and and there's got to be an alignment of purpose and an understanding of how we're going to work this project. And oftentimes that means we're not the cheapest solution, and we don't intend to be the cheapest. And I'm not saying that in a braggadocious way. I'm just saying that to do what we do right, we have to have the right people. And those right people, it costs a little bit more, I think. And we're just more, I guess, conscientious about our plan. That's why I think Kyle, who is, our producer, he's off camera. He's going to be putting out a blog on how we even set up a project for success in the beginning when we're bidding the project, how we look at,
the pre-construction is important.
And this is pre-construction even before we get a signed document. We're just bidding a project. So this is an example, a potential client of ours, not yet because it hasn't been signed yet, but Urban Land Conservancy, they've asked us to look at a demolition project they have here in Denver, and he's had several groups come and check out the spot. And Keith, our senior estimator, led the charge in bringing out the sub demo contractors to take a look at it. And Keith is looking at the building, and everyone's kind of going full board on what type of concrete and how they're going to approach this. And Keith steps back. He goes, "What about the trees in the perimeter? How do we want to, address that?" And the owner was sitting right there. He goes, "We've had 3 different groups come out here. No one's asked about the trees. No one has asked about what the site is going to be next, with a conscientiousness about what's going to be, what's forward thinking, and not just worrying about the job at hand, but what is the impact we're going to have on the community after we're gone." So that's the type of thinking that I'm really proud to be a part of.
Yeah, I will say I've worked with, I haven't worked for a lot of general contractors. I worked with a lot of them because, as you know, previously before this, I had my own owner's representation company. And so in that process, you're oftentimes comparing, 3 different general contractors on a project. So I've worked with dozens of them. And I would say that I probably would have never not worked for any of them for that same kind of fact. It's just like, they're not forward thinking for so long, up until somewhat recently. I feel like construction has been stuck in a rut. And when I say rut, I just feel like a lot of these contractors out there, they do things a certain way because their dad did it that way, and their dad before that, their grandpa did it that way. And it just became like this, this ever evolving way of like doing things. Devolving, yeah. And it just lacked a lot of innovation. And here you can really tell, just like I can quickly tell when I first started working here, that there was so much involvement here and so much learning from past mistakes. Everything that I wish like I had in my company or other contractors had in their company, like thought through, like they kind of figured it out over here. Because I will say that's one thing that Dennis does super well is like he doesn't make a mistake twice. You know, he learns from it, and we move forward from that, and we continue to get better. And as long as we're getting better, you know, that just means better things for the clients as well, ultimately.
Oh, absolutely. You know, you mentioned something about the construction industry kind of devolving because of that. We've, you know, that mentality of we've always done it this way. My dad did it. My granddad did it. Here's my mea culpa moment. I think that also on the other end of the spectrum, because like you said, you've hired GCs. I've also had to hire GCs for major renovation projects on the multifamily side. And I would say on the ownership of those groups, whether it's investment groups or even family wealth or individuals, the ownership group of some of these assets have done a disservice to the construction industry in this way. They require, you know, go out, get bids from the, you know, your GCs, and it is, even though they say, you know, price isn't the main factor, it really is, you know. And they treat construction as a commodity, and they treat the general contractor as a vendor.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do, you know, and I've made that mistake personally, and I've also, you know, I've also had to carry out the wishes of, you know, whoever I'm working with. Right, exactly. And a lot of these are Wall Street firms, you know, they've got, you know, certain return they've got to give. I understand the pressure that's on their end, but I think they do their clients a long-term disservice by viewing construction as a commodity and by viewing the general contractor as a vendor and not a partner.
Not a partner, yes.
And I think we do a really good job of setting the expectations up front. You know, when we meet with a client, we're going to actually refuse the job in some cases and say, look, this is
if
our
it's
process.
not the right fit for us and for the client, you know.
And also the process, we're like, we're not going to send you a bid. You know,
we're not just a
we're
number.
not just going to send you a number where you're just comparing number against number.
Yeah.
You know, when we send you a bid, it is also you're going to have to. We're going to do a presentation of why we got to.
That's such an interesting point. I'm trying to think like what other field is there where they just like, because it is true, you know. I mean, I've worked for developers, restaurateurs. Like when it comes time to choosing a contractor, it's almost like the contractor is just like a little kid that's just trying to get mom and dad's attention type thing, and these developers are just ruthless, you know. They make them nothing but a number, and you know, I get the negotiation tactics and things of that nature too, but every time I've seen like these jobs done like that where it's like a developer's just beating down the contractor, well then it just ends up in this like cyclical process of like, now I got to find another one and I have to go through that process again, versus like building a partnership with the contractor whom you trust and then making things much more efficient. Yeah. And how you operate,
how you communicate.
Yeah. How your billing process is done, who's your team members. Like it's just so much so much more helpful. And then and then that person, that general contractor values that relationship because like I said, they're the little kid that's like looking for mom and dad's approval. And once they get it, they're going to do their best to like, you know, knock it out of the park for them. And also the cheap thing too. That's something I've seen, a mistake that's been made over and over again. Like somebody that's just picking the cheapest person. Like I've seen it happen 50 times if I've not seen it a million, that like when a developer chooses all of the cheapest subcontractors, it always ends up costing them more money in the long run.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about, you know, because I think it's a three-legged stool, right? So, and not just in developers, you know, even in what we do on the renovation side, you end up having this kind of dilemma where I equate it to a three-legged stool. You've got the ownership group or developer, where we want to call the investor. You've got the general contractor, and you've got the architect. And what I've seen happen is, you know, the owner will, you know, get 3 bids, choose the cheapest guy. Inevitably, what happens, that guy orders them to death. So they end up not being the cheapest guy. And then the architect has to play the referee with all these change orders and act as the go-between between the owner and the GC, saying, well, yeah, these change orders are, these are legitimate change orders or not. So how much more easier would it be if we all three sat down, the owner, the architect, and us as a general contractor at the beginning of the project, right? And instead of just talking about the budget, we understand the budget, but what is the goal? Where are we trying to go together as a group? That very rarely happens. It's usually these little piecemeal. The owner has a budget.
Well, it's a backwards process because
is.
it's like the architect produces the drawings, and sometimes they'll release them earlier. You might have 75% CDs and then have to rebid it, like Tunnels to Towers. And we like to come in as early as possible, where we are having these OAC meetings prior to the drawings being completed, because architects are just that. They're architects. They're not builders. Sometimes they're both. Very rarely though. Architects, love to.
They're visionaries.
They're visionaries, but sometimes what they draw is not realistic. So that's why we like to come in early and have this like pre-construction process. We also offer owner's representation, construction management. But on projects that I've been where we've already chosen a partner, we know who our contractor is, and then the developer has a vision for a project, and then it's almost like we're helping choose the architect, and then it's a collaborative process from the beginning. Once you start your OAC meetings after plans have been submitted to the city, that's where the change orders start taking effect.
Well, let's talk about the pre-construction there for a little bit, because I've also been guilty of this as on the ownership side.
You've just done a lot of harm on that side.
I have. So I feel like karma.
The dark side over there.
Yeah. It's going to come back around, I'm sure. But I'm trying now to correct some of those mistakes. But you mentioned something called pre-con, and I think on the ownership side, they understand the value of pre-con, but what they want is free-con, right?
Yes.
They want the general contractor to come in, help them, get their plan from 75 to 100, and for free.
Yeah, I think you should trademark that.
Free-con?
Free-con,
Well,
TM.
I think Keith is the one that introduced me to that.
Oh, is he?
I was like, free-con.
Okay.
Keith's been doing it 1,000
No,
years.
he was just saying he's got to get his freak on.
Knowing Keith, you're probably right.
Yeah. If you guys see Keith,
they will see Keith.
Yeah,
Keith
that's true.
Yeah.
We will bring him on here. Yeah, we're going to be doing employee spotlights for everybody. I did want to talk a little bit about like just business development too,
Sure.
and what your thoughts are about it, and a little bit about like, you mentioned that you came from the multifamily world. How was that transition into being a business developer? What do you like? What do you define business development? What are your favorite parts? What are your least favorite parts?
Yeah, great question. I think I'm still struggling with what that means. Because I spent so much time in operations, and there was, as a VP, you did have some sales responsibilities. But now that this is my job, kind of 24/7. In some ways, it's freed me up. In some ways, I've been introduced to parts of me and skill sets that I didn't know were there, and parts of me that are still cringing about, the whole idea of business development as a sales, job. And that for me in the beginning was really difficult to make that transition. But the more and more that I'm sitting in this seat, and the more and more that I'm seeing actually some of the solutions that we're bringing to the clients, and then realizing that that's really what it's all about. Our clients have problems and we solve them. That's actually a good place to be in. So I have less of that, stigma behind being a used car salesman. Not anything against used car salesmen, but I feel like, I want to be a resource. I want to be a, just someone that can solve a problem, and that for me has immense value. The other thing that I really enjoy that I didn't think I was going to enjoy is the research. Like, when we call,
like a detective,
it's almost like a detective work. We're just getting a little piece of nugget here. Like, we'll be driving down the road and we'll see, some perimeter fencing going up, and our antennas will go up now. Like, what's going on over there? And we'll look it up on CoStar. Link out to CoStar. Hopefully, you sponsor us at some point.
Yeah, let's get
But
that CoStar money over
yeah,
here.
and I'll look and see who's the ownership group, and then that begins the spiral down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And
Then
who's
you're on LinkedIn, and the ladies' kids' names type thing. It's like what
and then you're
she loves to
pleasantly
hide.
surprised
Yeah.
that you're either a first or second connection with one of their connections, and you can
Yeah.
make that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The LinkedIn is such a powerful tool, and one that I've definitely underutilized.
And another hopeful future sponsor.
Yeah,
once
exactly.
we get our act together.
Shout out to LinkedIn. I mean, for me, I'm like same thing, and we had talked about this previously. It's like neither of us had ever been in like a sales position, and I'll be the first to admit, that salespeople just kind of gave me the ick. I could feel when I'm trying to be sold, like I feel like a majority of people out there, and it's just like kind of an uncomfortable feeling, and I just never saw myself. I mean, having my own business, obviously I was having to do business development, but I never really even knew what that was really until I came over here. And I was honest. Like I had talked to Dennis, and I was just like, salespeople give me the ick, and he's just like, this is not sales.
Talk about Dennis. And I can't wait to get him in. He's really shy and won't go in front of the camera, but what a visionary! What freedom he is, and what a risk he took in hiring the two of us, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge risk.
Well, I think he just saw, I think he likes to do things different. He saw moldability out of us. He saw other traits that we have that I think he thought was going to be more successful than a resume filled with sales experience,
And maybe a lot less of some of the bad,
Yeah, exactly. Bad learned habits and things of that nature. But I will say that he's been very open in allowing us the freedom to kind of create our own strategies. We operate not only in Colorado, but Arizona and Florida. And, each different market kind of has its own little panache you have to put on it.
I'm sorry, panache.
Yeah,
wow.
It's just, I'll pull out the dictionary for you next time.
I'm
Don't
telling
worry about
you,
it.
I'm impressed.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been a lot of fun, and I did say to him, I was like 2 months in, I was like, man, I just don't remember the last time I had fun at work. Like it might have never even happened, It might have happened like when my very first job ever, which I was like,
what was your first job?
I was working at a senior living.
Really?
Yeah, I was washing dishes at a senior living facility.
Wow.
Yeah, it was called The Retreat down in Westminster. Shout out to The Retreat. Let's not ask them to sponsor because they're very small. They might not have been able to afford that. But I would love to work with them again. But yeah, it was like a friend's brother was like the cook there, and they brought us on as dishwashers. And that was, I started in the senior living space early. And then I did, then through my construction career, I did mostly like very high-end nightclubs, super bougie restaurants, like extremely like elaborate homes and penthouses and like just like very luxury type stuff. And so to make the transition to senior living, I was like, I don't know how interested and fun I'm gonna have with that. And then they took us to the Vi, which the Vi is like a 5-star senior living resort.
I would like to live
Highlands
there
Ranch.
right now.
I would like to live there right now.
Yeah.
And I said that. I was like, is there any way that I could put my name on a list or something?
And
like,
dude, did you see
what
the
is
menu
the requirement?
and the wine list? I'm like,
yeah, they're like making flamme brûlée, or what is that? Like, where they like
flamme brûlée,
whatever it is, the
creme brulee. I think
not creme brulee, but like
bananas Foster, like flambe. Okay,
flambe. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it kind of sparked my mind, and I like design, and I like being able to be creative with that, and it kind of opened my eyes to see the direction of like where senior living's going, because where I started at my very first job, it was a little bit depressing, and it was kind of sad, and I was like, well, I've already not been having fun with work. I'd rather do something where I'm doing fun. And then, then we went to Arizona, and we got to go walk through the Montecito project, which is a Corsair senior living that we had just did a huge value add at. We had put a
You know,
new
I think
dining hall,
Elvis on our
a
roofing
kitchen.
division just went to a Cozier event up here
Yeah,
in
last
Westminster,
night.
so we
Yeah.
got to get with him and see how that went.
Yeah, he said it was all right. But yeah, we went there, and it was so cool to watch the residents, how excited that they were, And it was almost like the sadness, kind of like, it was like, now we're adding a lot of value to these people's lives,
Yeah.
When you're renovating their unit, or you're adding, a new dining hall, this was like a fancy dining hall. It had like a breakfast buffet table, like a bar top. We did
It had what, a
commercial
40-foot
kitchen.
glass wine.
Yeah, rack. So there is design in there, and so I appreciated doing that, and it's just such an interesting thing. Like you said, I love the detective sleuth work that you have to do. That's super fun, and I've always just loved making connections. I feel like you and I are connectors. And I like to connect other people with other people, and I like to build connections with other people, and that's why I'm so excited about this podcast, because for me, I'm more intrigued in learning the people's starts, and during this sleuth stuff, when you're like on LinkedIn and you look at their past resume and you're like, okay, this guy's the CEO of this senior living company, and it's like, oh, but 10 years ago, he was a business developer for a roof company,
Right.
It's just like the path of where people get to where they are. I just find that so so intriguing, so cosmic. Like, it's just, and me, I love
We start
the
talking about
universe, the cosmic energies, and and I want to bring that out of people, because I feel like people with good energies in this industry. I don't want to say they're rare.
They're not.
But I think that we need to shine a light on that.
I'm glad you said that they're not rare. I think, it's kind of like you ever been in a situation where you want to buy a car. You say, hey, I want to buy a white Range Rover because I know you're fancy, right? But you ever notice that when you put that thought in your mind, all you see now are
white Range Rovers. Yeah.
So I think it's similar in terms of like good people. There are good people out there, and I think the law of attraction. Another favorite topic of yours. They're out there as long as you're tuned into that frequency, and I think we are. And I think I see every day that the clients we attract, even our our sub base, everyone is tuned into that same frequency, and it's not what's that radio station, the WFIN, what's in it for me. They're not tuned into that one because everyone else is tuned into the what's in it for me.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's like we're not listening to that channel.
But I think we should bring some of those like sticks in the mud on here too, just to I make it a non-bias, because we want to shine a light on the industry, on these people, and maybe there's reasons that they're like it like that. There's no bias I have when it's learning somebody's background story.
Right.
I think just the human condition in itself is such an interesting thing, and like all the decisions that you've had to make to get to the point where you're at today, like that's a beautiful story for everybody, and I'm intrigued to hear everybody else's stories.
Think of all the impossible scenarios that had to happen in both of our lives
for us to be here. Yeah.
For us to be here.
Yeah.
Me, this young kid from the Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
I didn't even know Colorado was on the map till maybe I was watching South Park. No.
Yeah.
But, to end up here, and you're native born, right? You're one of the rare...
I'm Colorado born.
Yeah.
Yeah, Polish parents, but like even going back to that thing, it's like what do they have to do in their life to get me to my life? It's just like it's just so cool, and I could talk about that, and I do talk about that for hours with Tony outside of this.
He does.
But so I think that's actually a good thing, is like, who do we want to? I want to put this out here on our first episode of
Well, it's
Unpermitted.
actually our second, but it's our first.
Our first official episode.
Right.
The first one was supposed to be a practice run, which it ended up being funny. If you guys haven't watched that, it's pretty funny. Terrible quality, but it's still pretty good.
But and we talked about whether we take that one down and make this the first one. I was like, no.
Let's just keep it.
It's all about not that everyone wants to see how the sausage is made, but we're not afraid to show you how sausage, Polish. I don't know.
Yeah, is that you're just looking at me? That's all you can think of. But I do want to like put an initiative out there to any of our listeners that like, if you know somebody that's got an interesting story or an interesting outlook on anything in the, architectural, engineering, construction
Ancient
world,
civilizations.
ancient civilization, business, I want to bring my old mentor on who, moved from Lebanon with $100 in his pocket, and now he's probably built an empire that's worth $500 million.
Yep.
Interesting people like that, I think, is what I want this show to be about. I don't want to just interview a guy because he knows about, pressure treated wood, It's like if he's got a great story of how he got to that pressure treated wood, that would be amazing. But
and part of it will be the pressure treated wood in terms of educating, but you're right. I think we're going to have to find a balance, and I'm very interested and excited to take this journey with you in exposing some of those untold stories and giving a platform.
Same. And I'm excited for our digital marketing push. We were talking today about
Shout out to Kyle.
Kyle, yeah. We're doing a weekly meeting now, and we really want to be active online, and we hope that you guys, enjoy our content and have fun with it. At the end of the day, if you're not having fun in life, what's the point?
Sure.
So, I mean, we're all busy. We're all, professionals. But, I like this little Friday hour because it allows me to kind of end the week, on a high.
Right.
Doing something that I like doing, which is talking to my buddy.
Same. I couldn't, agree with you more. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I did, post kind of a teaser on my LinkedIn page about this Unpermitted, and I was actually shocked at the response.
Yeah, major
all
response,
the stuff that
yeah.
I post, the things that get the most views is anytime I post anything with my dog, but that for some reason they were like, oh, this is great. We even have some potential guests that want to come on through that. So yeah, I'm going to throw that request out there as well to my network and to, the network that happens to be looking at this. If there's a story you want to tell and and it relates to what we do in those three verticals or
business or
give us a shout.
Or health and wellness. I mean, one of our guests is going to be, is in the building right now. He's a professional kickbox instructor. But he wants to come on talking about social media, digital advertising, digital marketing.
And more importantly, mindset.
Mindset, yes.
Yeah, which is hugely important.
Absolutely.
In everything we do.
See, so it's not just your everyday run-of-the-mill construction podcast. We want to do things a little bit different. We hope that you guys, tune in and continue to enjoy listening. I mean, I think we're good. Wrap it up. I'm Chris Safransky.
I'm Tony Hunt.
And this is Unpermitted. And thank you guys for tuning in.
All right, buddy.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.